Hello and welcome to today's webinar on trust in the profession. My name is Stephen Lowry. I am Public Policy Manager here with Chartered Accountants Ireland, and I'm delighted that you can all join us this morning for what I hope will be a very interesting and insightful session. Today, as you may know, is Global Ethics Day. Global Ethics Day is an annual event to promote awareness and discussion of ethical principles and values on a global scale. So as part of this event today in Chartered Accountants, we'll be looking at the role of ethics in building trust in the profession and how specifically senior business leaders view Chartered Accountants through this very important lens. So in today's session, the running order we'll be taking a look at the results of the fourth Edelman Trust Barometer, which measures the levels of trust financial decision makers have in Chartered Accountants. This is hot off the presses, so you'll be the first to see it. And we'll have a speaker from Edelman to run us through that. We'll also be taking a look at a recent report commissioned by Chartered Accountants worldwide on measures the profession is taking globally to improve trust in the profession. And lastly, we'll be taking part in a panel discussion in which we'll kind of delve into the issues raised in both the reports in a bit more granular detail. And a reminder now that at the tail end of this session, there'll be about a 10-15 minute window where we will be answering your questions. So I would encourage attendees, as you may have a point you want to make or anything that's raised throughout the session, please feel free to type in the text box a question you would like me to put to our panelists and to talk through. So you can get the most out of this session, and any questions you want, we will be glad to answer. So without further delay, I'll just quickly run through who will be joining me today. Firstly, we will have Fiona Murphy, who is an Associate Director of Corporate in Edelman, and she will be here to present the key highlights from the latest Edelman Trust Barometer report. Joining Fiona will be Neil Fitzgerald, who's the Head of Ethics and Governance here at Chartered Accountants Ireland, and Neil will be speaking to the Chartered Accountants Worldwide Trust paper. In addition, we have Professor Pat Barker, who's a former lecturer in accounting and finance and business ethics at DCU, as well as Neil McAdams, government and infrastructure advisory manager at EY. So without further ado, I'm pleased to now pass you to Fiona Murphy from Edelman, who will run us through the latest Edelman report. Fiona.
Thank you, Stephen, for the warm welcome to present to you today on Global Ethics Day. I'm very happy to be with you to share the findings of this wave of your study of trust, evaluating trust in the accountancy sector for chartered accountants on behalf of my Edelman colleagues in our DxI data intelligence team at Edelman, who oversee the annual trust barometer, which is part of our proprietary intelligence IP at Edelman. As you're all likely aware, the objective of the research is to measure current levels of trust in the accountancy sector, with a clear focus, obviously, on chartered accountants in particular. 2018 established the robust benchmark and outlined that trust landscape, and we've moved through waves of the research to now wave 4 in 2019, 2021, and now 2023. A little bit about the methodology. I won't belabor the point here, but what you have is a very robust sample size of over 1,300 participants across 8 markets, and these are all financial decision makers of director level and above, covering England, Scotland, Wales, the full island of Ireland, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. The fieldwork was conducted between March and June of this year. And without further ado, I will bring you through the top line key findings in the various areas of priority. And I should add that the full report will be available to you after this session and being launched today. So as Stephen said, it's hot off the press for the moment. So you're the first to hear the key findings. And it's a good news story, I'm very happy to say. Effectively, trust, integrity, your role and reliability, and the opportunities for the sector, for the industry moving forward are the key findings here. Trust in chartered accountants has increased 7 points since 2021. This is a marked increase, and it takes trust levels in chartered accountants to the highest level since the study began in 2018. Likely of significance for you, while there was an uplift in trust levels for accountants as a sector, it's notably smaller than that for chartered accountants. So it effectively means that chartered accountants are now differentiated very clearly from others in the profession in trust levels. The increase across accounts is unique, and it has not been mirrored in other financial professions. In fact, and I'll show you some of the granular in that, other financial professions have decreased. And the chartered accountancy professions bodies also retain and build on high trust across all of the markets surveyed. So it's not an anomaly that it would be one market over another. It's very even spread. Secondly, we look at integrity. Like 2021, integrity remains the most important driver of trust in relation to the sector and chartered accountants in particular. This aligns with really the identity of the organization and the identity of the industry and the counsel and expertise that you provide, because it aligns with regulations and respecting confidential information. And integrity is so important as we live in an environment where misinformation concerns grow, particularly in respect to automation, and the prevalence of automation. And so chartered accountants can capitalize on the existing strength in this area in consolidating their position as data guardians. 77%, which is very high, of financial decision makers say they've used or intend to use chartered accountants to lead digital transformations of their organization. So again, there's opportunity there. Next, in relation to reliability and the role of chartered accountants. Again, 7 in 10 FGMs have said that their organizations turned to chartered accountants during the economic uncertainty. This is very much clear in relation to both the skill set and the purpose, but also the reliability of chartered accountants. There's becoming much more focus on the consultative guidance versus just purely cost-cutting measures, which is significant. And finally, in relation to purpose, there's no doubt that purpose-led initiatives continue to grow in importance. We've seen in our own annual Edelman Trust Barometer that purpose-led initiatives are being looked for much more from businesses as opposed to other bodies such as media or government. And the trust levels in purpose, particularly true in respect to speaking out areas, are areas of concern, and it's an area of opportunity for chartered accountants. So there are the overarching key findings. As I said, a good news story. Trust is continuing to increase, and this year really demonstrates that trust in chartered accountants specifically is becoming a key differentiator. A little bit more about the granular detail in relation to those findings. Interestingly, alongside nurses, accountants were one of the key professions that showed an uplift in trust this year. As I mentioned earlier, some other financial professions saw a decline. And you'll see in these findings in relation to chartered accountants there and accountants, that's where the differentiator comes, where the chartered accountants' levels of trust are markedly higher than that of the sector as a whole. So your key takeaway from today is that differentiation is very, very clear. Moreover, the other financial professions that saw a decline, they're still showing that there's volatility, whereas the increase in trust is clear from your profession. It's driven by integrity, and that's very, very important for you as you move forward. It remains the key driver, and the net findings of the research is very key for the industry to consider. The identity of the industry in terms of the trust in what you provide is very, very key to this. So the percentage who are saying that these elements, integrity, dependability, ability, and purpose, which are the drivers of trust, is very, very high. A net integrity level of 84% is a terrific finding for the industry, particularly in respect to respecting and protecting confidential information and operating with compliance to laws and regulations. So as I mentioned, data protection, being trusted with that important data and complying with regulations. So there are the opportunities as you move forward in terms of utilizing strong trust to carve out that consultative role, elevate that consultative role, particularly during the cost of living crisis, and more, I'll speak more about that in a second. And also then getting ahead of the curve in relation to purpose and showcasing that additional value of the core integrity measures. Supporting businesses in the long-term resilience has shown no level of decrease. So this doesn't seem to be just trust during, the pandemic or other kind of volatility in the market. There's definitely remaining a level of trust and an expectancy to continue that trust. In terms of 83% of financial decision makers saying that chartered accountants have the skills to navigate that operating environment in the future. That has continued to steadily increase on a very balanced and reflective level from 81% to 83% in this wave. And similarly, that chartered accountants play that vital role in helping businesses adapt to the new challenges. So these trust levels are totally becoming consolidated, which is great to see. And again, in terms of the successful navigation through Brexit, through COVID, the cost of living crisis in the current state of play is seen as some, economic uncertainty that chartered accountants play that vital role. 77% saying that they support businesses to manage the economic uncertainty, 78% saying that they are essential to businesses in navigating those challenges, and particularly the cost of living crisis, and 77% saying that the role has become more important to businesses since the current economic uncertainty and cost of living crisis. Overall, 7 in 10 are saying that the organisation has turned to chartered accountants specifically for the services or advice during that current economic uncertainty and cost of living crisis. That was obviously slightly lower during COVID and Brexit. So it is clearly, as I say, consolidating and growing. The opportunity then I mentioned in relation to purpose, from a macro perspective, purpose and speaking out, it's becoming increasingly important in societal issues. And as I said, our barometer has found that people want more societal engagement from business, not less. Business is now the higher, showing the higher trust levels across the board versus government, media, and so on. And everything from climate change to workforce resilience and everything in between. So there is an opportunity for chartered accountants to help the businesses be bolder with these initiatives. In terms of the granular detail on that, where we found is the areas are particularly around speaking out publicly about social or environmental issues, speaking out publicly on issues that relate to public interest. You'll see there the significant increase, and also balancing the commercial and public interest in their work, which makes perfect sense. So there are opportunities then in terms of engaging more and being more vocal on ESG and supporting businesses in collaborations with government in this space. If you look at these figures, they're very robust. 45% saying that ESG is the area they'd like to see more resource from chartered accountancy professional bodies on, and over just a third saying that ESG is one of the top priorities where chartered accountancy professional bodies should be partnering with government. And they've also noticed, particularly in relation to diversity, equity, inclusion elements, or issues rather, climate change, sustainable development goals, very clearly ESG issues. Finally, In terms of data guardians and your position and identity as very trusted in relation to data guardians, that's an opportunity for the sector for sure. We're obviously moving into an increased technology advancement, and control over data is becoming more important than ever. Again, this is changes obviously from the market. Some markets a higher level than others. However, overarchingly, 7 in 10 say that the challenges relating to data accuracy and misinformation are concerns for business. Smaller business less so, larger organizations more so, but certainly when you're over the 50% mark there, it's a concern. And therefore, the financial decision makers are recognizing the role of chartered accountants in this space. These are very significant considerations and figures in this wave of research, showing a clear increase from previous waves, with 2 and 3 saying that technological advances mean that my organization has turned to chartered accountants more regarding that data accuracy and misinformation. And again, as I pointed out, in terms of both the skills, but also the vital role that chartered accountants play, we have 81% there saying they are expected to be the custodians of data integrity, and the trust levels match that, which is great to see. 77% saying that chartered accountants are essential to businesses in navigating those challenges, and 75% saying that they're becoming increasingly important in navigating those challenges. These results are effectively matched by the trust levels and also the performance levels, which is great to see that the chartered accountants are recognized by the financial decision makers as either performing well or performing very well across those rudiments and attributes of data protection and integrity of data. So I am really happy to be able to present those good news results to you this morning. While I'm not chatting with the panel, and I'll hand over to Stephen to move to the next part of this presentation. As I said, the full report with more granular detail is available to you, and I thank you for your time for listening this morning.
Thank you, Fiona. That was a lot to take in. There's a lot of information there. But as you say, a good news story. I think it's interesting to see that accountants, one of the only professions alongside nurses, to actually see an uptick in trust. But I think also probably a good insight into the evolving role of accountants in the modern workplace and how it goes beyond the strict limits of what would have been our traditional core competencies. So certainly a lot to take in there. I hope our attendees found that useful. So just to move on quickly to our next speaker, I'll bring in Neil Fitzgerald, Head of Ethics and Governance here at Chartered Accountants Ireland. And Neil is going to speak to the recently published paper by Chartered Accountants Worldwide on trust in the profession and the measures that the profession is taking on a global scale to improve levels of trust. So Neil, I'll hand over to you.
Right, thanks, Stephen, and many thanks, Fiona. And for those that know me, I'm a bit croaky this morning. I'm not hungover, I swear. I have a head cold, like half the country, I understand. But anyway, I shall push on. Thank God my presentation is only 5 minutes. Chartered Accountants Ireland is a member of a global network, and that global network is Chartered Accountants Worldwide. In addition, we're also a member of the Global Accounting Alliance, but we have a very large global network. But Chartered Accountants Worldwide commissioned a position paper on actually looking at what is the infrastructure within the profession that actually facilitates the development of trust. And that's what Chartered Accountants Worldwide are actually launching today is this position paper. So I just want to give you a very quick overview. We'll have a little video, and then we might discuss aspects of it as part of our panel discussion, but just to introduce it to you, our members, and to let you know about its existence. So it looks at the foundations and impacts of chartered accountants' trusted roles in society. So it dovetails nicely with that Edelman research, which was actually commissioned separately. It wasn't. It's just a nice coincidence that they're launching on the same day. So these, when Chartered Accountants Worldwide looked at the infrastructure, and looked at the things that actually provide or facilitate the accountants to develop trust, it broke it down to these 4 different things. First of all, is their commitment to act in the public interest, which of course is enshrined in Chartered Accountants Ireland's Royal Charter dating back to 1888. And it was the whole reason and basis on which a bunch of people in Ireland went to Queen Victoria at the time and said, listen, it's for the public benefit that you commission us and allow us to form a society here that trains, regulates, and supports accountants in the profession. And on that basis, she was convinced, and Chartered Accountants Ireland came into existence. So that commitment to act in the public interest, and that is kind of consistent across the world. When you look at the formation of other institutes, other accounting institutes, it's on that basis is the kind of key, one of the key pillars, that foundation, if you like, that's why we exist. Provide information, data integrity. I think Fiona referred to it, data guardians in her presentation. Also looking at ethics, education, and standards that goes along with that. The dependability and impact that society can have on accountants, and in the evolving role of society itself and its evolving need for trust, because trust is not consistent. It's earned in different ways, and what society expected 50 years ago is very different to what society expects now. So they're the kind of 4 kind of key pillars, and not to dwell on it too long, because the paper is an interesting read in itself. But just to give you a very quick highlight, we talk about the commitment to act in the public interest. It's preserved professional ethics of accountants in whatever capacities they may be serving. That's recognizing that accountants these days, I'm a chartered accountant, I haven't sat down to do debits and credits in a long time. Yet here I am as a practicing chartered accountant, fulfilling a role within an organization. And then there are other accountants who are preparing financial statements, doing tax returns, doing statutory audits. There are other chartered accountants who are chief executives, chartered accountants working in the public sector. We have chartered accountants working for charities, non-profits. We have chartered accountants who probably do nothing at all to do with accountancy, yet they're still a member of the profession. So in whatever capacities they may be serving, this code of ethics underlines what we're about. And to promote quality, expertise, and integrity in the profession of accountancy by our members. I suppose that's the role of your professional bodies. And that's what to do, and that's why we commission reports and research like this to find out what we're doing right and what we're doing, what improvements we need to make. So that commitment to act in the public interest. And what's not there in the bullet point, but the most important point that's not there, in fact, because I take it for granted, is you. And you're here listening to this presentation, but I mean, it all begins and ends with you. You signed up to the profession, you are a member of the profession, you act in the public interest, you do what you do, you've got integrity and all of those things. So that's it. You've got all this infrastructure, but it's what individual members do with it is what's at. So the individual member is probably the most important aspect of the commitment to the public interest. I'm going to go down to the right hand, the bottom corner, and say ethics, education, and standards. And again, here we are today. It's ethics and trust and competencies enshrined in our education in our syllabus. We have loads of education CPD courses, and here's a very specific webinar on ethics. But we have all this infrastructure again within the professional bodies. The Chartered Accountants Ireland have the Ethics Resource Centre, but in addition to that, and we might look kind of shakily at regulation, but actually we have a very effective regulatory regime as well. So Chartered Accountants Ireland also regulates its members for compliance with the Code of Ethics, and that's been very effective to date. And other professional bodies do likewise. We're not a self-regulated profession, although we are responsible for carrying out oversight, but then Chartered Accountants Ireland itself is regulated by about 6 or 7 different regulators, including the government departments, the Central Bank of Ireland for awarding certain qualifications, the Financial Reporting Council in the UK, and IASA in Ireland, and some other bodies as well. So we have all that infrastructure again within the bodies again to help the members. Within the dependability and impact, and a lot what Fiona was talking about there is those roles within the Chartered accountants have within the business ecosystem, very broad, very diverse, and you can see what those key financial decision makers expect from accountants in those roles, and we can see the results are mostly favourable there in terms of we can see how dependable they are. So, I mean, we're occupying a very, very broad range of roles there. It's quite useful. And then, as I said, to sum up at the very start, it's also society's evolving need for trust. That is changing. And CAs are bringing, chartered accountants are bringing kind of their skill set and competency to the fore, bringing transparency to help a whole range of issues that exist today that didn't exist before, such as the sustainability challenges facing the world, and of that rigorous process and commitment to education and improving as we go along. So, folks, very much, as you can see, very high-level helicopter view what's in that paper. You can download the entire paper there from Chartered Accountants Worldwide itself, and you get the full detail there, giving you a synopsis. But Chris, perhaps, enough from me. Perhaps it'd be interesting for our members to hear what some other people have to say, if you want to play that video.
In a world where misinformation can be viral in seconds, chartered accountants play a key role in integrity and trust throughout the economy. Historically, that role has focused on ensuring the quality of financial reporting, but increasingly, this scope is widening.
Information demands and the concerns of governments, investors, business and society at large are growing. As technology enables an influx of data and signals, trust and reliable information are at a premium, including financial information and increasingly reporting on sustainability-related matters.
With each added layer of complexity, trust in chartered accountants grows more important. But while the profession has worked hard to earn trust, it must work hard to maintain it.
The Chartered Accountants Worldwide Trust Leadership Task Force has produced this paper, bringing together the ways in which the profession works to build and maintain trust, allowing us to speak with a united global voice meaningfully with all professional accountancy stakeholders.
As always, the chartered accountancy profession stands ready to act in the public interest and meet the evolving needs of society. We have worked hard to gain our trusted role in society and will endeavour to maintain and develop further the level of trust that has been afforded to us, as evidenced in the Edelman Trust Barometer, where chartered accountants are now the most trusted finance professionals.
Chartered accountants' core set of skills mean we are perfectly placed to meet the ever-changing challenges that face us, from both a societal and economic level, locally and globally.
We've created the Trust Leadership Paper for you to use with key stakeholders across your networks and beyond, so that we can demonstrate how we work together globally to build and maintain our trusted position. By using the paper, you will help to create a consistent worldwide position, language, and voice on trust throughout the chartered accountancy profession.
That was very interesting, and I think taken with the Edelman report, there's a lot to digest there. And with that in mind, we might just open up our panel discussion. And I suppose the first person I'd like to bring in is the esteemed Patricia Barker. If I could bring you in, I suppose you've heard in the reports there from Edelman the importance or the increased importance of accountants getting involved in what would be termed purpose-led initiatives. And I'd be interested to know how you see the role of accountants evolving in advising organizations on matters, as broad as sustainability, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what are the expectations of accountants, in a practical sense in this regard?
Okay, thanks, Stephen, and good morning, everybody. Delighted to be with you all this morning to discuss this really important area of ethics within the profession. I think accountants, Stephen, can fill those roles, but really in terms of the marketplace, expectations of the marketplace are not necessarily that the chartered accountant is necessarily their first person to go to, unless the accountants themselves step up to the helm. Because there will be other niche organisations who will develop expertise and will fulfil a vacuum if we don't do it. And if I could just just in my role as director of a number of companies, maybe I could mention just 6 areas briefly where I think the accountant, where there are ethical issues where I think the accountant can step up to the helm. The first one would be cybersecurity. And I think that we have the Artificial Intelligence Act and the Digital Operations Resilience Act coming down the track at us from the EU. And there is a role there for the accountant to step in and to advise in that area. It is one of the highest risk areas for most organizations. And, areas that they talk about all the time would be risk areas like the cloud-based breaches and the enhanced phishing attacks and the supply chain attacks and all the social engineering attacks. So most of those are AI powered, and there is a role there for the accountant. The second one would be the risks associated with back to the office working. People are looking to someone to advise them. The accountant can help there. The third would be risks associated with the costs of new talent investment and upskilling existing talent, which is really major. And there is a role there for the accountant. And the fourth is transparency. And, the accountant has this integrity basis to his or her qualification. But the transparency that the accountant is being asked to advise on is suffering from some ethical pressure. And, we see pressure on accountants to advise on active solutions. How can we get out of this problem? Can we trust our accountant to give us a solution? And, we've seen in England the solutions that we provided around the non-dom status and barter accounts here. So there is a risk there. There is a role for us to advise on transparency, but there's an ethical risk there. And the fifth one would be sustainability reporting. Again, people are turning to the accountants because we do report. Annual reporting is our gig. And so they're turning towards the accountant to advise on that. But again, high ethical risks around greenwashing and so on. And in that area for the accountant, there is now a need, as indeed there is for other areas, to collaborate with other professions. So we're going to have to learn to work with economists, with lawyers, with engineers, with hydrologists, with carbon experts. And the key question here for us is, do we trust them? Do we apply the same level of trust to their professional work that's going into our joint advice to the client on sustainability? So it's a two-way trust question that the accountant has to ask. And then the final thing I would say is that there's a role for us in advising on diversity. And I myself think that it should be a bottom-up process, that there is a risk of people cloning, from the top. They're looking for diversity, but they're cloning. So I, as an accountant, here am I, Pat Barker, looking for a woman, or I'm looking for a person of colour. So I get my woman or I get my person of colour, but essentially they think the same way as I do. So, there's a risk, an ethical risk of cloning and of not going for people of neurodiversity or for an ethicist or somebody, who won't think the same as I do. So they would be my six areas that I would think of that the accountant can and should help with. Thanks, Stephen.
That's really comprehensive, Patricia. Thank you very much for that. You touched on quite a lot of things there. One of which that piqued my interest was the role of AI, artificial intelligence, how that's kind of creeping in. And I suppose it's as AI gets more increasingly integrated into our business processes, there's obviously different expectations on the role that accountants will play. And the Edelman report delved into how there's an expectation from decision makers that accountants will be the lead in bringing about digital transformation in their businesses. So, Nuala, I might turn to you, whether you have any kind of thoughts about how you see that role evolving, how you see accountants, taking their position in the AI transformation and the digital transformation of businesses, which I suppose in a real sense is directly outside what we would traditionally have seen as our core competencies.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen, and thanks to everybody for coming today and inviting me to join the panel. I think in terms of AI and automation, I think decision makers really look to accountants. They provide that underlying assurance on the information that goes into the systems. AI and automation can only be a positive thing. It can only increase efficiencies in businesses. It helps kind of shift your time efforts to other things, more to the critical analysis and contextualizing the data that comes out of those processes, or kind of reports that are the outputs of the AI programs. I think for the accountants in those businesses, and I know for me in EY, AI and automation is a huge push at the minute, and a lot of our staff who are accountants are actually working in that team, and a lot are moving from, say, audit to the more traditional assurance roles, because we understand that whatever output is given, we need to have reliance on the underlying data. We need to know that it's complete and accurate and being fed into the programs. We also provide that analysis of the information afterwards. I think that element is not too dissimilar to our traditional role as accountants. You know, using the underlying figures, making sure everything is accurate and complete, there's nothing missing or misleading. It's just a tool that makes our role more efficient. And I don't think that's necessarily a huge shift away from our role or our purpose. I think decision makers will look to us because they know that as a profession, we're putting a lot of time and effort into our education when it comes to AI and automation. Across chartered accountants worldwide, that's a real push. And I think it's amazing that we are leading the way in education for accountants when it comes to automation. We're starting right at the beginning and saying, this is the future of accountancy and of business. How can we make sure that we're embedding those ethical principles before you qualify, so you can come in there and lead the charge and lead businesses the right way of using AI, the right way of setting that into your existing business, so you're not shifting what you do and shifting a lot of the traditional roles. You're providing new opportunities for businesses and opportunities for people to upskill when they're already members. So there's lots of courses available where, say you did, like me, your FE some time ago, and maybe didn't get that opportunity to learn at the time. We can now go back and upskill so that we're not just relying on our newly qualified to lead the way, that we can use our skills and adapt to provide more useful and informative support and guidance to our clients.
I completely agree. Some really valid points there, and I suppose, Neil, I might just bring you in on this. We're talking about how, you know, chartered accountants need to, I suppose, or are expected to play a lead role and embrace AI rather than see it as some sort of existential threat. But there's obviously a requirement there to balance the incorporation of AI into our business processes, as well as maintaining, you know, ethical approaches to our performance. So, you know, how do we strike the balance there as chartered accountants in that evolving process of incorporating AI into our workplaces?
I think back to core principles, Stephen, is what I'd say. I mean, at the end of the day, what are we good at as accountants? People would say we're good at solving problems, but actually I would propose that we're actually good at identifying what the problem is in the first place. How many times have we been brought in to solve a problem only to find out that it's actually something else causing the problem? So I think when you look at AI and Duna referred to there all the AI tools, there's an infinite amount of AI tools out there at the moment, all purporting to solve whatever certain problems, and that's fine. And the accountants have the skill set to actually say, well, this is actually the problem that you need solved. So then the client and the business can go and then decide, okay, well, this is the AI tool we need. So I think that's very, very, very first principles in terms of making sure we're identifying what the problem is, and before we deploy whatever tool. And then in terms of the tool itself, Nuala has already alluded to, you know, go back again to first principles of accountants. We're data driven, we're analytical, we like to validate. So you know, what type of information does the tool need? What is the source of that information? How reliable is that source? What sort of controls have we got in place around that data? Is that data, you know, you having having data is one thing, but is it organized? Is it cleaned? Is it safe for use? And then you feed it into the system, and then what comes out, and not just to accept blindly what comes out of the system. Nola, you already referred to this. You kind of look at the output, and does that actually make sense? Does that look reasonable? Is there something off, with that? So there's that kind of core, I suppose, professional competence. Now we talk about AI there, and what I'm talking about, back when I studied to be an accountant, we were talking about auditing around the computer and through the computer and all this. But the core principle of that hasn't changed. The technology has, the speed and the complexity has changed, certainly, but I think we're still back at those principles. I think as well, Stephen, when we start talking about data, I'm thinking of GDPR, but confidentiality as well. And I say that in the context of the accountant and maintaining confidentiality, but I also mean it as well in the context of the tools as well, and having the controls in place to make sure that that data it's being used in there. But if it's using personal data, that accountants will think of those other things as well that need to be thought about when deploying AI, and it's not just getting the right result, it's how you get it. So I mean protecting the integrity of information as well. So if you're using personal data in AI, clearly that's got to be protected and put in place controls as well. And then my final point on that, Stephen, would be is the complexity itself. Maybe I was a bit slow in my training as an accountant, but there are certain accounting standards I found fairly complex and fairly difficult to deal with. But my training didn't teach me how to get the answer, or didn't teach me the answer. It taught me how to get the answer. So unpacking complexity. And again, I go back to that's kind of the profession's about a lot. Whether you're auditing, whether you're financial reporting or sustainability reporting, dealing with complexity. And it's back again to my very opening point, Stephen, understanding the problem and unpacking it and then going about it in an analytical way. And I think society and businesses trust us in that approach. And I think that's how I see accountants' roles in AI.
Absolutely. It'll be fascinating to see how it plays out. One other theme I wanted to touch upon, which came up in the Edelman report, is the whole area of reliance on accountants in, crisis situations, difficult economic environments, and we would have seen that obviously a huge uptake in that during COVID, and now has been borne out in what you might broadly call the cost of living crisis, the inflationary environment we're all in and enjoying, I'm sure. But the role of an accountant there, there's obviously, with pressure, ethics can be, or our ethical kind of standards are put to the test. So I might just open this to all the panelists, but Patricia, I'll begin with you. Are there specific strategies, in a practical sense, that accountants should adopt to ensure that they adhere to ethical decision making in those type of higher pressure environments? Oh, I think you might just be on mute there, Patricia.
Apologies. You think Sorry. After all the stuff. Okay, so yeah, very interesting question. I think the thing to remember for everybody sitting here today is that ethics is around an area outside of rules and regulations. So by and large, we are required to comply with legislation. We are required to comply with laws. We're required to comply with rules, with codes, and so on. So ethics is when something happens that the law doesn't help us or the codes don't help us. And we're saying, but what does the law say? And quite often lawyers are not the best people to help us in that situation, because they kind of say, well, I can't help you. The law doesn't tell us to do that. Or the law doesn't say you don't have to do that, even though your gut is telling you that you shouldn't do that, or you should do that. So it's to do with this feeling of something in your gut, doing the right thing. And that is not to do with the profession. That is to do with every single individual sitting, listening to this morning. So it's an individual thing. It's like Niall said, it is an individual thing. And so therefore, what I would say is everybody who is a chartered accountant should have done some work on themselves on themselves. And that's work to understand their own values. So I would suggest that they should have looked at principles of philosophy, but theories of ethics. So they should know. I should be able to ask each of you and each of us, which school of ethics do you belong to? You know, would you call yourself, would you call yourself a social contract ethicist? Do you just do what the law says, full stop? And after that, I say, what's in it for me? Is that you? Or are you the kind of person that looks at the consequences of an action and tries to get the greater good for the greater number of people? Or are you a deontologist? Do you look at the categorical imperative? Do you look at the act and say that act is wrong, regardless of the consequences? You know, that's kind of a summary of philosophy in 2 sentences. But you need to do some work on yourself to understand your own values before you hit an ethical problem. If you're trying to sort out your thinking in the middle of an ethical dilemma, it's too late. I would suggest that everybody goes away and does some work on themselves. And so what you need to do when you hit an ethical dilemma, you need to know that it is an ethical dilemma. You need to ask yourself, is this a challenging situation? Do I feel afraid? Do I feel nervous at work? Are they doing something that I'm not entirely comfortable with? Is my gut telling me it's wrong? Can I not sleep at night? Am I suffering stress as a result of this? Is there cognitive dissonance? Is there something going on here that is against my values? And so what I would say, if that happens, you need to ask yourself if you are constructing justifications. Are you in your head saying, well, it's okay to do this because nobody is really getting hurt, or because it's not costing that much money, or because, well, there's a quid pro quo in another area? Ask yourself that. Am I constructing justifications? 2, talk to your mentor. Whoever your mentor is, talk to your mentor. 3, engage with your colleagues and engage in what Socrates called a discourse. So engage in a discourse with your colleagues and talk to the professional body and confidentially. And then take the best action you can. And your best action will be, 1, you confront this thing. 2, you whistleblow. 3, you ignore it and walk away from it. Or 4, you leave the organization. So there's a package or a whistle-stop tour, Stephen, in answer to your question. What do I do as an individual chartered accountant, you know, in relation to these ethical issues that are not covered by regulation? Thanks, Stephen.
That's really great, comprehensive as ever. Patricia, Nuala, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of what Patricia said is exactly what came to my mind. You know, we all have an individual responsibility for ethics, but equally we don't live or work in a silo. The only way we can actually discover what we feel is right and discover what's right for our clients or our own businesses is by going to experts. So speaking to our professional bodies, speaking to if there's an ethics partner in your firm, speaking with your teams, because the only way that we can develop a better understanding of our own limits and our own gut is to learn from other people. So if we think of new trainees coming in, apologies, I talk a lot about the trainees and newly qualifieds, but the only way that they can feel confident speaking up, or they can feel confident maybe unpacking their own thoughts, is to hear that other people are having the same struggles, that are questioning things themselves, to give them the confidence to speak up if they feel that something isn't right. And I think that comes through a lot in education and training and informal conversations. And I would love to say that I know exactly what school of thought I fit into, but it's definitely made me think, and it's given me something to take away from today. But I do think what Pat said is really important, that you don't want to be faced with an ethical crisis and realize, I actually don't know the way that I feel I should respond to this. So you need to do a bit of work on yourself and then share it with your team to find the best output for everyone. And just one thing I'd say is, I think when it comes to ethical issues for chartered accountants. I think it's a real struggle to balance what's right for my business or my client to help them expand. You know, a lot of what we do is to help businesses go beyond the norm, to grow and innovate. We need to understand what are the limitations of that growth in an ethical framework, but also what we need to do individually and what society needs us to do. And I think that's a three-pronged, probably three prongs that go different directions that all need to be pulled back together. And that's a constant challenge for chartered accountants. But I think the fact that we're aware of it, that we talk about it, that we have so much educational input on this from the beginning is why there's so much trust in chartered accountants when it comes to ethical decisions, because I feel like we're constantly worried about what the right thing is and are we doing the right thing for ourselves, our businesses, our clients, society, that it's at the forefront of everything we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose I too will be reflecting on what school of ethics I fall into after this call, which was very insightful. I'm sorry to cut in here. I want to allow our audience members to get their questions in while we still have time, and I believe there are a few. So with that in mind, I might just bring in my colleague, Rachel Pattinson, who has been monitoring these. And Rachel, fire away with any questions you might have for the panelists.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. Hi, everyone. So a couple of questions coming in. So the first one I'll just cover is in relation to the Edelman results. So this one is for you, Fiona. So the question was in relation to our integrity and trust scores. Are they higher or similar to the legal profession? So I think you did cover that, but maybe just to remind the viewers of the scores there.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you see the full report, you'll get even more granular. Excuse me. One of the things I noted is effectively it was just nurses and accountants that saw an increase in trust levels in this wave. The long and short answer to the question is lawyers have a lower trust level score. It's not quite apples and oranges, but make of that what you will. They would be kind of in the low 60s, the initial waves, rising last wave 6 points. So there was an increase in their trust level scores to 67, but down again at 3 points. And again, just to reiterate, when you compare that to accountants, we're in the high 70s, and again, up 3 points in trust level scores in this waves, but chartered accountants in the higher 70s, and the significant increase that I flagged there, the increase of 7 points to 85% in this particular waves, showing that differentiator. Hope that answers the question. But like I say, very much the granular and the detail on questions and that can be seen on the report.
Brilliant. Thanks, Emil. Fiona. The next question we have there is the UK failed to prevent fraud offences as part of the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Bill is coming, which is linked in many ways, to strong ethical controls with companies. Do we anticipate similar, bills coming to Ireland and indeed globally? Neil, I might pose that one to yourself.
Yeah, no problem, Richard. It's an actually excellent question because it touches a little bit on what Pat was saying earlier on about the law will tell you one thing and then how you interpret that and what you do. But actually what you see is the law responding to Patricia because the law is actually now advocating and trying to put in place a legal requirement to be ethical. But then that pushes us down that dangerous path of defining what ethical behaviour is under law. This is not the first time we've seen that. That's a very good reference to that Economic Transparency Bill coming through in the UK. But we see that as well in directors' fiduciary duties in Ireland that have been in place since the 1990s and are now enshrined in the Companies Act 2014 to act in the best interest of the company, to act with integrity. We see it in the charities regulator requirements as well to be a trustee of a charity, behaving with integrity as part of the charities code. We've seen it most recently in the FRC corporate governance code in the context of driving the right cultural behaviours. We see it actually also in the financial services sector in Ireland in terms of the individual accountability regime and being accountable for not doing what you're required to do under whatever your job description is or whatever is required under that regime of you in the position that you hold in financial services. all of that, Rachel, is kind of looking at, it doesn't define exactly what you must do, but it allows lawmakers, it allows regulators to look at what you've done as a whole and kind of say, is that reasonable? Okay. We've seen it also happening. I participate in a advisory group in Brussels, and we've seen it recently as well in European legislation. So yes is the answer to that question. We can see more of that. They were looking at the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. And one of the most controversial discussed parts of that in the European Parliament is the suggestion to include accountability for directors and their requirement to make sure that they're embedding sustainability within their organizations. That's getting a lot of kickback in the European Parliament because it's broad and it's kind of looking for a certain behaviour and it's not defined. So how do you hold somebody to account for it? But yes, you're seeing a lot more of that enter into the legislation. And if it doesn't make its way into legislation, it makes its way into regulation. And if it doesn't make its way into regulation, it makes its way into policy. So it's going to find its way into one of those three. So yes, is the answer. Great.
I think we're close on time, but one question which is kind of linked nicely to Pat's comments earlier. So someone had asked, does Patricia think that a person can hold a variety of ethical personas rather than being aligned to one single school of ethics?
Okay, thanks, Rachel, and thank you very much for that question. Very, very good question, whoever put that in. And I'd say it applies to many of us from time to time in our lives. And the basic answer, and it's complex, but the basic answer is no, you just have one set of values. But the problem is that your set of values doesn't always align with your actions and your behavior at a particular point in time. And you may feel that you're forced into acting in a particular way against your values. You may think that you'll only do it once. You'll just do it this once just to get over a particular hump, and then you'll go back to your values. Or you may think, well, it's okay to do this in this situation. It's okay to take a bribe from an Arab, but it's not okay to take a bribe from an English person. You know, that there's a sort of a sense of relativity around your values. The answer is that you're in your heart of hearts, your values remain the same. If you are a consequentialist or if you are a deontologist, that's what you are. And you should hold your values, because once you start letting your values slip, it's very hard to recover. It's like sliding down a children's slide. It's very, very hard to get back up again and to recover. So, you know, you may say, oh, well, in dealing with this client, I have to do this, or in dealing with that client, I have to do something else. It's going to leave you with a deep sense of stress, of what's known as cognitive dissonance, and it's not healthy. So I would suggest to you, first of all, find out, well, what are my values? What are my red lines? What kind of a ethical decision maker am I? And then I would suggest that you hold your values. And, you know, just talk to other people, because one of the problems with accountancy in the noughties was we didn't stand together. When there were ethical pressures on us to do fudgy deals with all sorts of complex financial instruments, we didn't stand together. So as a chartered accountant, talk to your fellow chartered accountants and stand together, support each other in your values. Thank you. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Pat. And just one last question. There was in relation to resources, and I know Neil has very helpfully shared a link to the ethical resources that Chartered Accountants Ireland has available for members. So that's in the chat. And then there's a couple of messages of thanks to the speakers. So I'll pass back to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And I think that brings us neatly to the end of today's webinar. I'd like to sincerely thank our panelists and speakers, Fiona, Patricia, Neil and Rachel as well, our tech support, Chris. And thank you to everyone for attending. The reports, both the Edelman Trust Barometer as well as the CAW Trust Report, will both be emailed to attendees after this session. I hope you found today very insightful and interesting. I hope the panelists enjoyed it too, and I wish you all a very good day. Thanks very much.